Buenas and Hafide. I'm Christiana Quinata, and I'm a second-year master's student at Iowa State University in the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology program. A part of why I wanted to go to grad school and do research in the Marianas was because of my experiences in the jungles of Guam. I've surveyed the flora and fauna as a field biologist where I learned firsthand about the natural history of Guam. I particularly enjoyed surveying for and learning about the endangered Mariana eight-spot butterfly. This sparked my interest in butterflies of the region. As I dug more into this, it was clear that butterflies in this region were scarce in the scientific literature, even for a group of insects otherwise well studied in other parts of the world. We have two listed endangered butterfly species in the Marianas, the Mariana eight spot and the Mariana wandering butterfly, which is believed to be extinct. Yet there's little research done on how native butterfly populations are adapting to our changing islands. So I wanted to contribute to the scientific knowledge, awareness, and natural history of our native species and personally learn more about these insects. Butterflies are an integral part of our island ecosystem. They are pollinators and they are also a substantial food source for birds, lizards, and other insects. Because they are preyed on by many different types of predators, they may have various defense mechanisms. Butterfly wings are the largest part of the insect and provide the largest platform to communicate with their predators. They can signal to their predators that they are toxic, which is a chemical defense, and so they use really bright colors to signal their toxicity. Another defense is using wing eye spots. They can be used to startle a predator and create a pause in an attack just long enough for them to then escape. Another thought is that eye spots signal predators to attack the wing margins and away from vital parts of the abdomen, allowing them to escape. Large eye spots tend to make butterflies more susceptible to be spotted by bird predators, but they're also known to startle predators, ground predators such as praying mantids. Whereas smaller eye spots along the wing margin make them easier to spot but allow deflection of attack away from vital body parts. In addition to color patterns, signals on wings, wing morphology, such as wing shape and size, is important in butterfly defenses against aerial predators. Wings are highly adapted to the flight behavior of a butterfly. There are two main groups of flyers. There are gliders and evasive flyers. Gliders tend to be toxic or distasteful, and they rely on their awful taste rather than evasive flight skills to avoid bird predation. While non-toxic species have to fly really erratically in a zigzag motion to escape avian predators such as which is what the common evening brown does, or common moths that we see around. The shape of the wings have evolved to accommodate these different flying tactics. So in this graph, it shows us that toxic species have more elongated wings for gliding far distances and even for faster flight. And because of their elongated wings, they are not as maneuverable as non-toxic species, which tend to have shorter, stubbier wings, which are great for creating a quick lift and that iconic zigzag pattern. One of the biggest changes um, in the ecology of Guam has is the functional loss of forest birds since the 1990s due to the brown tree snakes. For the last 30 or 40 years, butterflies have been released from predation pressure of birds on the island of Guam. Whereas butterflies in the northern Marianas still have an intact native forest bird population, as well as surrounding Micronesian islands. So this creates an accidental experiment in which we can examine the impacts that birds have on butterflies by assessing butterfly wing traits on northern Mariana Islands compared to the butterfly populations on Guam. Countless lab experiments conclude that birds are a strong driver in butterfly wing traits, and now we can test some of these hypotheses and attempt to answer the question, are butterfly wing traits undergoing rapid evolution in an environment without forest birds? So the first hypothesis is wing morphology, and we hypothesize that there will be more similar wing shape on islands with birds and less similarity of wing shape in islands without birds. So we predict that in Guam, there will be more wing shape variation, and in Saipan, less wing shape variation due to aerial predation pressure. And our second hypothesis is looking at wing eye spots. We predict that butterflies without birds will have larger eye spots than butterflies in areas with birds. To test our hypotheses, we use standard photographs or digitized images of museum specimens and supplemented them by field caught specimens. So using the museum specimens, I was able to readily search for species that were cataloged by the University of Guam Insect Collection on GBIF prior to going out to Guam. So I photographed specimens from the UOG collection as well as the Northern Mariana College collection, which was being held at the University of Guam. So most of these specimens were collected in the Marianas between the 1970s and up until the late 2000s. The third insect collection that I visited was the Bishop Museum. So this museum houses millions of specimens and is probably one of the largest collections of insects for the Pacific region. What was really interesting about this insect collection was how old the specimens were. They were collected between the 1930s up until the 1970s. And to supplement museum collections, we did some field collections in Guam between July through August 2020 and in January of 2021. So to digitize the specimens, we placed a camera on a copy stand and made sure that it was flush and leveled. And then we placed the specimen, laid out the labels, and placed a ruler for reference. So to test our wing morphology hypotheses, we use the geometric morphometric techniques, which basically uses insect morphology that is biologically relevant, such as the intersection of wing veins and the wing margin along here on the hind wing, and then we input it into TPS Dig and TPS Utility, which uses these landmark points on a wing to look at shape independent of the size of the butterfly. So we used a linear model then to look at the response variables of shape and size against the factors of island, sex, and BTS presence on Guam versus pre-BTS presence, which would be specimens from like the 1930s to up until like the 80s. To look at wing eye spot size, we counted the number of eye spots on the hind wings, and we measured the diameter of eye spots using the software ImageJ. We ran another linear model then to look at the diameter of eye spots as well as the number of eye spots. Our sample size was in Guam, we had 36 species. In Saipan, we had 5, and Tinian, we had 2. And we were only looking at Melanitis leda. And we ended up finding that there was no difference in spot number and size between Guam, Saipan, and I guess in Tinian numbers. And for the wing morphology, we did not have, I'm currently looking at and analyzing the results for that. Some factors of why we might not see differences between the islands. It could be mating behavior, territoriality, and there's still enough of a predation pressure on Guam by other non-native birds or other ground-dwelling predators such as lizards and praying mantids. Another thing could be that there's just not enough time to adapt. We have to give them more time to change based on the predation pressure. And more importantly, we need to increase our sample size, which we are currently doing. So in summary, we learned that crowdsourced data, whether it's looking online through GBIF online databases or using iNaturalist observations to help inform our hypotheses and when picking specimens or species to look at, museum collections are extremely valuable in looking at trends over time, such as the example in the Bishop Museum. And it's a way of preserving our natural history in the region. So hopefully we can provide them more support for preserving those specimens. I'd like to thank my advisor, Halder Rogers, many of the faculty at University of Guam, Dr. Aubrey Moore, Ross Miller, Jim McConnell for photography advice, as well as my family and friends who have helped me along the way. Thank you, and Masi.